Hello and welcome to Complementary Colors. My name is Melissa Pribyl and I'm here with Cara Rude in our studio as we are discussing all of the amazing conversations we had at NeoCon. One of those amazing people we got to talk to is Jon Strassner, who is a veteran with 28 years under his belt and rocks the title of Strategic Advisor and Environmental Storyteller. So we got to meet with him in the Metropolis Sustainability Lab and discuss his insights on current sustainability efforts and areas where we can enhance our actual sustainable initiatives. Jon is also the co-host of the podcast Break Some Dishes, where he brings climate change activism back to interior design industry. It is one of those podcasts that help you to distill down information and actually digest a way to empower yourself and take action as a designer. Highly, highly encourage you to listen to it. And I loved his quote of "Don't let perfection stand in the way of good." I hope you enjoy the conversation. We're really excited to have you. I think the first time I met you at Scale in New York, and we were on a panel about sustainability together.
Yeah, with the American Chemistry Council.
Yes. I think we had a really good time.
Everybody else was like, oh, and we're like, yes.
I believe that was the last panel I was ever invited to.
But you went out with a bang.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm glad that I got to experience that.
What does your shirt say again?
Yeah.
But since then, I've watched you move from VP of Sustainability for HumanScale, and then you were that for ASID, and now you are an environmental storyteller and an advocate and for hire to help people understand their sustainable journey. You want to explain what you do?
Yeah, I work with companies, primarily manufacturers in our industry, that I'm really familiar with. I help companies really understand their impact and talk about it, right? So a lot of companies, they don't really know what they're doing yet. They don't know what they're not doing. They haven't really curated their work. And so sometimes they just need help kind of getting it organized, right? But at the end of the day, it's got to be a part of their narrative in a really genuine and authentic way, right?
Right.
And I think companies need to say, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
In fact,
be honest.
We're not doing that great, but we really want to do better. And so the first thing we're going to do is just kind of show you, we're going to put our cards on the table, right? And I think that, if you're trying to build a brand that appeals to designers, you have to have good stories, because I think that's where designers get these personal connections. And that's how designers are going to, choose your product, right?
That's true. We do kind of work on the why.
Yeah.
The why.
We do. A lot of the why.
Yeah. So I really try to help companies develop that, amplify it, broadcast it.
You just reminded me of this. It's not necessarily a quote, but just like a new framing of what you're saying. At ILFI a few weeks ago, one of the speakers was talking about being a curious amateur. And he was like, everyone always asks me what I am, and I like to shy away from expert, and French for amateur is the love of. So, what are you curiously in the love of? And it helps when you were just describing that. I think a lot of manufacturers in the contract industry, unless they have it right and perfect, they don't want to talk about it yet because it's embarrassing, And if instead it's like, I am curious about this, and it's like, okay, so what do you love and what do you want, And I think it could broaden our conversation more instead of waiting until in the shadows you figured it all out and then just celebrated it.
Yeah, I think people always say, don't let perfect stand in the way of good. Right, and you have to take a first step, and it's not going to be a perfect first step, but if you don't take the first step, then the journey never begins. And I think for everybody, it's a journey, and it's like stepping into a river, and it's terrifying because you don't know where it's going to take you.
And you have to figure out where you're going to go.
You got to figure it out.
You're sidestepping.
You got to be strategic. Yeah, I really think so. So companies, I think, are trying to figure it out. Right, everybody's in a different state right now.
Where did your journey start?
Oh, well, we talked about this, right? So
I know.
I lived a portion of my life in a very rural community of West Virginia, The closest city for us was Parkersburg, West Virginia. And if you've ever seen the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo, it's about the DuPont factory in Parkersburg, West Virginia, that was illegally discharging large amounts of PFAS chemicals into the water system. And a cattle farmer actually was watching his cattle die. He didn't know why they were dying, but he knew that the green gook that was leaking into the ponds had a lot to do with it. And so he started, a massive class action lawsuit against DuPont that ran for 20 years.
20 years.
And eventually wound up being something like a $670 million lawsuit.
Dang.
But the crazy thing is DuPont settled this lawsuit for under $1 billion. Wall Street predicted that it was going to be at least $1 billion lawsuit. When the dust settled, the very next day, DuPont stock went up because they settled for under $1 billion. And so that was a win. Wow. So anyway, not to get overly cynical, but that's and to sort of build on that a little bit, several years ago, my sister and I went back to our hometown because we wanted to see what was still there and what kind, we wanted to go see it again, and it's really beautiful countryside. And it was strange because we got there and the Trans-Canada pipeline had moved in to pump propane out of this part of West Virginia. It's like their biggest export right now. And they're all very proud of the fact that they're, pumping more propane than, anywhere else. And, they are like in the top 10 markets for propane or something crazy like that.
Wow.
I talked to my cousin who was selling his chemical rights to Trans-Canada.
Wow.
And it was kind of like a bittersweet moment, I stopped by to see him,
right?
To say hi, and I was like, so, what's going on? And he said, oh my God, Trans-Canada, thank God, they've changed my life. And I'm like, oh my God.
It is really hard, the mindset in those rural areas because economy, it's rough. And I grew up in a very similar town, and I would say it's not even bittersweet of, I kind of avoid homecomings to Nikiski, Alaska, because it's melancholy to see these relics of when I was a child. They looked like castles, right? These oil refineries, and there was a fertilizer refinery. They just lined, you drive straight through these things and there's stacks of smoke and they're like, ooh, fire, but they're like burning all this off-gassing and there's alarms when you're playing outside and you're like, oh, there's an alarm. You're just, it's so, it is very interesting how it shapes your story. It's like there's nothing I don't touch now in my part of the industry where I don't think about chemical health.
Yeah, you're influenced. It's in the back of your mind. And it's hard to come in from an ivory tower and come sweeping in and saying, all of this is wrong and it's terrible and you're all immoral, and you'll go to climate hell for this someday. But,
right?
Yeah, it's hard.
Right?
You can't do that. I mean, these fence line communities, these people are in a very difficult spot.
Absolutely.
So, that's a little bit of my origin story. But I mean, I loved growing up in West Virginia. My uncle ran a third-generation sawmill, and so where I grew up, you either worked in the sawmill or you worked in a coal mine. So, he kept people out of the coal mine, right? And of course, or you could go to Parkersburg and work for DuPont. So you had
three choices, but two better.
So many
I choose
options.
the sawmill.
They didn't have work from home back then, unfortunately.
Right? Man. So, but the history of materiality, just to bring a sunny side, maybe a little bit, I would love to talk a little bit about that. Do you storytell specifically to materiality, like the origin stories of things, and do you bring people, along with those stories? I'd love to hear some of the stories.
Oh, I think that materiality is so important, and I think that, I was with HumanScale for 21, 22 years, and I wasn't VP of sustainability. I was VP of, I think, workplace strategy at the time.
So you're VP of ASID.
I don't want to step on Jane Abernathy's coattails. She does a great job there with sustainability. But, when I first started working with Jane, she was a designer, and she had a philosophical issue with being a designer, in that the better you are at your job, the more stuff you're responsible for, right? And she was the first one that really started talking to me about plastic. And I was like, Jane, why are you so bummed out about plastic? Like, what's the big deal about plastic? Yeah. And she was like, no, we have to find alternatives to plastic. And so I think my time at HumanScale in my mind was one of the earliest manufacturers in our industry to really plastic. Start figuring out what's in their product.
Yeah.
Right. And their thought process was, oh my God, we're shipping product all around the world and we don't really know what's in it. Like, wow, that sounds a little irresponsible, actually, And then you start looking at what is in your product, and you're shocked that you have poisonous chemicals in your product, and you're like, wow, who would do that? Oh my God, like we just assume there's somebody out there looking out for us. Like, who would let that happen?
Right, like you just assume if it's edible, it's food.
I'm like, this is legal.
That's not always the case.
I'm not buying this on the black market or anything. Why should there be a poison in it?
Right.
And so then you start to realize that, things like Chrome 6 are really bad for you, right? Things like PVC are really bad for you, right? And it really kind of opens your eyes. And I became a bit of a toxic substance nerd, right? I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. Like, I thought the EPA protected us from that. So then I found out that, the EPA doesn't really have the capacity to protect us from toxic chemicals. And actually what happens is, in 1976, the government created the Toxic Substance Control Act of 1976. 1976, okay. They did this, right? And at the time, there was about 40,000 chemicals that we were making and we were using, right? The US government actually wrote this act and had the chemical industry review it and look it over.
Well, that sounds smart.
Right? It's a whole nother episode to go into the Toxic Substance Control Act, let me tell you.
Let's call it the red list later. We'll do that.
At the end of the day, the burden of proof is on the EPA.
Yeah.
So if you look at the FDA, right, the burden of proof is on the pharmaceutical. They've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it's not going to hurt anybody.
Right.
It's called the precautionary principle, right? If there's any chance that somebody gets hurt, we don't make it. Mm-hmm. The EPA operates exactly the opposite. And so as a result...
It's until someone gets hurt?
As a result, they have to, initially, when a chemical company comes out with a new product, a new chemical, the EPA relies on this chemical manufacturer to give them all the data on it, right? And so they have 90 days to stop that chemical company from manufacturing the chemical. If they can't come up with a case within 90 days, and the chemical company just goes, you know what, we're going to go and make this.
This is why you made really good friends with that green chemist.
Oh, yeah. Because he was like, well, actually, PVC is that's a good material. It has its place. And I was like, well, I don't know. PVC is not great. So, yeah, I think, when you look at our comfort with toxic chemicals, the EPA has really only regulated about 9, right? And it's ridiculous. We're at about, I think, 83,000 right now that we're currently making. Right. They just banned the asbestos, right? And they're making a big deal because they're going to regulate 2 PFAS. Right. No, not 2, 5, I think. 5 PFAS. Do you know how many there are?
A lot.
Well, there are like 12,000 different PFAS chemicals.
And they're bioaccumulative, so they're all up in our bodies.
They don't call them forever chemicals for nothing, do they? Yeah, I know it. I'm like 5 out of 12,000, but they're focusing on the 5 that are in like water bottles that leach into water.
And I'm gonna have to sprinkle in like the good fairy really quick and just throw like microcycle a bone right now, because Joanne, she's figured out how to train mushrooms to eat PFAS and make it inert. So there are some pretty wicked companies out there doing some good things, Yeah. So if they're not going to ban it, at least somebody's making mushrooms that will eat it.
I'd like to see someone train mushrooms.
I know,
Just imagine like a little circus
master.
I want
a podcast coming to you soon.
I want to see what those mushrooms look like after they've been dining on PFAS chemicals.
Right? Gosh.
I think there'll be like a match between a morel.
I bet nothing sticks to them. I bet they're totally waterproof. You see these ads for people like squirting ketchup on their shirt and it just rolls off and falls on the ground. And I'm like, what about that feels right to you? I mean.
So This is a story about that made my brain just like start to wheel. I recently just bought a new camper because mine was totaled. But one of the like after services that this RV camper like salesman was trying to sell me was this like anti-stain fog that they would put in the camper. So basically they fog the interior of the camper, and he's like, and then nothing sticks to it. And all I could think was like, no.
How many people are you poisoning?
And because I was giving them crap because some of these campers have white couches, and I'm like, you're gonna have a camper with a white couch, and you're gonna go to a campsite. And there's like, well, no, it's fine because you fog it, and then nothing sticks. So I was like, you fog me? Like, I don't want to know. My husband had to put his hand on my knee because I was ready to be like,
triggered?
give me your material list. Like, I'm about to tell you how you're poisoning everyone. But yeah, be careful what after things. Yeah. Who knew that you could fog the inside of a building? It's just so stains don't stick to it. Probably has lots of PFAS, but you know.
Well, what's the alternative? You got to clean. I mean, come on. If you got to do one or the other, it's like the Febreze commercials you see on TV.
Yeah, you're like, let's just freeze all of your neurons. Like, just because you don't smell it doesn't mean it's not there.
They put somebody like in a container truck full of garbage, but they spray with Febreze, and the person's like, lavender? I think I smell lavender. They're like, see how well it works?
I know. I love it because the graphic is always like it encapsulates smell and then poofs it. You're like, no, actually, you're paralyzing the nerves in your nose. Okay, so I just feel like Happy Wave needs to come in, or people are going to be like, well, I'm done with that today. Okay, so when you said what's the alternative, you have to clean it. Like, I think, the storytelling of materiality, when I started to dive into that in my own life, it reminded me of why I love certain things so much, like brick.
Yes.
And there is this road in Florida that my dad grew up on that we would go back and visit my grandma's house. And when the sun is hitting the road just right, you see 4 fingerprints on each brick on the entire road. And you just see these glistening fingerprints. And you cannot help but be moved. And you're like, there was a hand. And it was the history of not just the material, but the history of the person is now permeated into your life. It's the same way with the wabi-sabi of brass, and we've talked about like the way wood wears, and I feel like our contract culture is like, make it look new forever, and so let's plasticize everything so we could clean it easy, when really it's part of that wear, it's part of the wabi-sabi, it's part of the history that is really what is making us feel human and connected.
Even the place we're staying here, and we got a really cool place in Fulton Market, and it is like brick everywhere. You can see the way that the exposed structure was constructed completely differently back in the day with like all the zigzag joists. It's beautiful. And I remember reading, and they're like, it's called, what did they term it? They called it brick dust. And to not be alarmed with brick dust, because brick dust is natural. And I mean, yes, because it's a material that's going to grab onto everything that it flows onto and make little dust bunnies.
Verna and I talked at HD Expo, and we talked about remanufacturing, refurbishing, reusing. And I think that our latest episode dropped, and we talked about, remanufactured furniture. And it's really tough because, And by the way, I really do think our industry is great. It's a lot of amazing people that are trying to do a lot of things to be better, right? The challenge with our industry is we're very much like the fashion industry, right? It's trendy. We're following palettes that get dated, and we have designers that want things to be new and current and not outdated. And so, we do need to move away from everything's got to be bright and new and shiny to, hey, we can reuse some stuff here and keep it out of the landfill. Yeah. And I think that's, it's hard, but, how do you come up with a sexy way to say refurbish, remanufacture?
What is that, industrial chic? We've got a little bit more of like, let's bring out that wabi-sabi and the history.
The human story.
But then they're trying to do it with new materials, right? Like they want that vibe and they want that feeling, but then they're trying to recreate it instead of...
It's like buying distressed jeans.
Right. Isn't that just infuriating feeling? But I do think that there is just a shift between, where are you getting your kick? Because it's passion, right? Like, for example, sitting in the heart of NeoCon about the new, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is what it is. And I think part of it is we're here for inspiration. So instead of trying to reframe and saying new is great, we should say, history is what is inspiring, And so I guess, do you think that we need everything we have? I know we just started talking about, you were saying you're not even, you got upset you had to buy new shoes because you're trying to deconsumerize your life. But do you think in this juncture, let's just throw it at the industry, do you think our industry has everything we need already?
Boy, that's a tough one. Here we are in the hallowed hallways of the Merchandise Mart. You're asking me that question.
They can't hear us. It's very acoustic.
The heart of commercialism.
Everybody has to swear to secrecy. This conversation can't leave us. This isn't being recorded, is it?
Right?
This is just between you and us. You and me.
No one else is here.
We're burning NeoCon to the ground.
I think, if you walk around NeoCon for the next few days, you're going to be inspired, right? You're going to see beautiful things. You're going to see beautiful materials. I think that there's going to be a lot of good solutions that are being shared, a lot of biopolymers and product that's going to be made free of plastic. And so we're definitely heading in the right direction, right? I think that, listen, this is for you guys to decide if you want to keep this in the episode or not. But you
already when you start that way, I'm like, hell yeah, we're keeping it in the episode.
I think that every industry suffers and struggles because it feels it has to grow and grow and grow. And growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell, right? That's a quote. How do you do better this year than you did last year?
Yeah.
Not necessarily by being bigger than you were last year. You can be better than you were last year.
And it doesn't
and you
mean
can
bigger.
measure through a different set of parameters than your size or your net sales. I mean, maybe you set some goals for your organization that don't focus on selling more new stuff. And I guess, one of the things that I like to do is I think our industry needs more provocateurs out there. People that are going to say, well, I get it,
Isn't the name of your podcast Break Some Dishes?
Yes.
I feel like, I was going to say, doesn't that seem like right in line?
I'm wearing my official Break Some Dishes t-shirt today.
You promote. You do that. I love yes.
You just broke the NeoCon dish. What have you done?
Yeah. So your podcast.
Yeah.
Tell us about the why behind your podcast.
We are in our 5th season now, and we're really excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I never thought it would go this long. It was pretty. You talk about an amateur and being curious, right? Verda, I do this podcast with Verda Alexander.
Who's so funny,
one of
by
my
the way.
best friends. Yeah, she keeps me on my toes for sure. But we, years before the pandemic, we measure everything pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, right? But we were going to do a series of showroom events because we were both passionate about talking about climate, and she was going to come from a designer perspective. I was going to come from more of a manufacturing activist's perspective, and we wanted to be provocative and rattle the saber and poke the bear and just stir up some shit, And we started to do this, and we were like, this is going to be awesome, and then COVID hit. And we're like, son of a bitch, now what do we do? So it was like, well, Verda, we'll just do a podcast. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world. And we didn't know the first thing. We literally had to Google how to podcast, and we were like, okay, let's figure this out.
Look at you, amateur.
I know. But the funny thing was that everybody was quarantined. Nobody had anything to do. So I had a lot of friends in the industry that were doing really cool things. And so, our first season was really just okay, let me just reach out. I'll get my friends to join us. I had, one of my friends was a CEO, surf writer, right? So he joined us. Somebody else from the Lonely Whale Foundation. I had a friend from Borreo. They were pulling fishing nets out of the ocean and making nylon 6 out of them. And
nice.
So we had a lot of great conversations. And so that's what started Break Some Dishes. But we wanted to literally break dishes. We wanted to break things. We wanted to break status quo. We wanted to break expectations. And, that's what kind of like what we try to do. And this season, our most current season, we're doing it with Sandow, which is great. It's a great team of people. And we're focused. Originally, it was going to be pirates, miscreants, and outlaws. And Verda's like, Jon.
I mean, that's a good one, too.
She's like, pirates and outlaws aren't always good people. We need to find something else. Rebels, so now we settled on rebels.
Dishes,
and
No, I like it. At least it's still violent. I mean, I don't know. There's something about the violence that's really akin to. I'm like, as long as it's like a punch in the face a little bit.
I mean, Verda, we can change the name, but can we still wave swords around?
I know. I love how you thought saber, and I just thought champagne. But.
There you go. Yeah. So now this season it's been great because we talked to like individuals that are really doing things to save their own individual ecosystem. Like we talked to a biologist from Austria who is trying to save this bird called the bald-headed ibis. If you Google it, it is arguably the ugliest bird you've ever seen.
I mean, the name kind of sets you up for it, right?
I think it's called the northern bald ibis, right?
I mean, ibis even just sounds like a sound.
And I asked this guy, I was like, I said, I thought this was noble until I Googled this bird. Are you sure maybe you weren't meant to kind of let it go? Maybe
beauty in the eye, Jon.
But you know what he did? He realized that climate change was causing the bird to start their winter migration too late.
Oh, late.
And they'd migrate from Austria and Germany down to southern Italy, if we could only be this lucky, right? So they had to fly over the Alps, and so they need thermals to lift them up over the Alps. And if they leave for that migration too late, they miss the thermals, and that's what was happening. And they were hunted to extinction by Europeans. So Americans aren't the only assholes.
So someone thought they were cute?
Europeans did one bad thing more than us. Okay.
All right, we're going to talk about it. So he literally, he hatches these things, and then they imprint on you. Birds imprint on you, and they think that you're a parent. And he flies an ultralight, and they follow him. They follow him. He put together a new migration pattern for these birds. It's 2,500 miles. It takes 6 weeks. He now has 2 ultralights that fly these birds.
How many birds are we talking?
He has rewilded something like 360 or 370 of these northern bald ibis birds.
See, these are the kinds of stories you're talking
about.
These are the environmental storytelling right there.
Yeah, and that's more on the biological side of climate change. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stories on toxins and chemicals too. The thing, the crazy thing about climate is like whatever you start talking about, it really doesn't matter what it is, you're going to get sucked into this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because it is very holistic. I mean,
it is.
We could work in food waste right now to the conversation, and it is completely cyclical back to all. So
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just listened to a Norwegian cruise line talk about how they save all their food scraps from their cruise. They have a compactor. They compact it when they get back to port. A farmer comes and picks it up, and they turn it into soil. They turn it into
That's awesome.
So I mean, there you go. We just did it.
I
know.
We
just did it. Come on, try another one.
Right? No kidding. Well, because now, okay,
use sneakers. Come on.
I know. Let's just. I'll just this anecdote. Since like a few weeks ago, I told my husband, I was like, I feel like Neo from Matrix. Like whenever he used to see everything in zeros and ones, I see everything in carbon. I'm like, Americans waste 30% of our food. And I'm like, I'm just looking at that as like carbon and energy. And I'm like, now I'm looking around at all this, like, I'm like zeros and ones.
On top of the fact that a lot of Americans don't understand the time, attention, passion, and detail goes to growing that food.
Absolutely.
Like you have your own garden outside. I'm like, okay, I can do this year. I can do this year. I'm going to save my tomatoes.
Right? That one tomato is a lot more precious when you know the whole process.
I think when you think about climate, I think that we all assume that experts should talk about it, right? And if we're not an expert, if I'm not an environmental scientist or a chemical engineer, I shouldn't be talking about the Toxic Substance Control Act. But the reality is that anybody should talk about it. In fact,
absolutely.
It's a movement, and so we don't need necessarily more data and more science. We need people to really talk about it, whether they think they're right all the time or not. We had this one of my favorite people on our podcast very early on, Russell Goldberg, who's one of the founders of Stick Bulb. Okay, they make stuff out of repurposed wood. And he said to us, he said, the problem is people wait until they know they're right before they start talking.
Yeah.
You can't wait until you know you're right, because then you're going to wait forever. It's like being perfect instead of good, right?
You're right.
And so I think that, nobody wants to come out and say, well, embodied carbon is a problem. And honestly, 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the building industry, which is alarming. But what's really alarming, it's not that. It's that it's been that way for the last 20 years. We've known that. And all the shit we do, we haven't moved that needle. The transportation industry, who we love to hate, right,
has moved the needle.
25%. Yeah. So, but it's not like somebody could say, well, John, it's actually 38%. So get your shit together, right?
Right. It's like, what's that point made?
I don't care, right? Yeah. The point is that you're thinking about carbon, and we should all be thinking about carbon, right? And we should all be talking about it.
As long as it leads to action. And I think that's the thing, is the disdaining of small things. It's like, well, gosh, that small thing won't do anything. But obviously it is. It's doing something. Like the straw kick really got to me. I was like, okay, all right, we really care about straws. But whatever, it did something, So it did something.
It ruined my milkshake.
It ruined my milkshake.
Yeah.
We're all eating pulp now. We're just like, non.
And by the way, a lot of people have said straws, schmaws. Like, come on, man, the straws were not destroying the planet. But the Lonely Whale Foundation, that's the foundation that actually created the straw campaign, okay? And she explained to us, she said, we chose straws because that was going to trigger people.
It was.
We could figure out straws. If I said single-use sachets, right, and nobody's going to hang on to a single-use sachet, and then people keep like, so somebody pulled a straw out of the nose of a turtle. Well, whoop-de-ding-dang-do, it was one turtle, but
everyone uses straws.
Guess what? It's a movement, right? Yes. So movements aren't about science and scientists and experts swaying public opinion.
It's about real people.
It's about people telling stories that resonate, that we can hang on to, right?
Yes, that affect you. And so it's like, it brings it up into conversation every time you go out to eat, or every time. Absolutely. How do you think that we could, the next thing to make reuse framed, or using less framed? Like, I'm sure with all the storytelling, it's like, man, that's like the big fish, but what is the straw? What is the gateway drug into?
Yeah, man.
What's the straw?
Yeah, because you're looking for that trigger. There's got to be a trigger, right?
Where everyone's like, yes,
or a lever,
use less.
Right? Yeah. Like, what's that leverage point to show us that less is better? I'll tell you, for me, it was the pandemic. For me, my life instantly got so much more simple, right? And I didn't die from it. I was like, oh, wow, actually,
I'm okay with this.
I'm okay with this, And I think, part of it was then when we came out of the pandemic, like nothing fit anymore. And then I was like, I really don't give a shit now, right? And all my stuff had COVID dust on it. Like I hadn't put a jacket on in over a year. And when I finally put one on, like the dust on the shoulders, I was like, holy crap. So I just called it COVID dust. I was like, I got to get a vacuum in the closet, man. I haven't been in there in a hot minute. What, pants without drawstrings? Holy crap.
Oh my gosh.
All my socks had to go in a Lululemon bag because all the, like, how when you put something on and you go to like stretch it up and the elastic just goes, right?
Oh,
You hear the elastic die,
yes. Oh my
and
gosh.
you're like, well,
I love that it's audible.
Putting your socks
I'm gonna
on.
listen next time I pull up socks and be like, is this audible?
It's like a death sigh. Like the elastic just goes.
That's so funny.
And I'm like, these socks will never stay up. I do with running shorts.
I
put on a
think
pair of
you've
running
ruined
shorts and it
socks for
happens.
me.
Like, okay. See? I'm like, hey, do we have any duct tape downstairs?
I guess nothing lasts forever.
I'm not throwing these things away.
Oh my God. Well, being at NeoCon, we've been asking like people if they had like advice about how to survive NeoCon, but I want to ask you a different kind of question. If you were to tell an attendee and us a question that you would want us to ask manufacturers about how to break some dishes, what kind of question would you tell us to ask?
Oh boy. So you could keep it really simple, and you could say, do you have any toxic chemicals in this product?
That's a good way to get kicked out of a show.
You could, well, because there's...
Am I kicking you out of my library? Is more like we could...
Yeah, there you go. That's the counter to that. Right, but I think, and there are companies out there that are red list free, right? And I think if you can walk through NeoCon under the lens of materiality and just ask questions like, what is this made of? Maybe that's the question. What is this made of? And I think that you'd be surprised. A lot of manufacturers here at the Mart will probably be able to tell you what it's made of, but I think a lot of them also won't be able to tell you what it's made of. And I'll tell you,
say something.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one story real quickly that just frames things a little bit. I was talking to somebody from a manufacturer, and I won't say who, and I won't say what product, but they were telling me that they made a PVC-free product, and then they also made a product that had PVC in it, right?
Yeah, one of
and they were really excited. They were introducing another product this year that was kind of in the middle. And I said, well, why do you have to be in the middle now? Because you had PVC-free. Like, why can't you just, you're done. That you hit the finish line. And they said it's because designers have told us that they can't specify the PVC-free because it's too expensive. And so we needed to find something more of a happy medium. And I think I wanted to share that because I think it does it's easy to lose touch with reality. But that's kind of reality, right? Again, there's good and there's perfect. And it's good to try for perfect, but sometimes you have to settle for good, because it's better than bad.
Thank you so much. That was
It was fun.
I love the roller coaster of emotion that we rode too. Right?
Anger.
We're like, whoa, pull us back up.
You'll laugh, you'll cry. You'll be on the edge of your seat.
Again.
It's the feel-good podcast of the summer.
And if you want the other one, the break some dishes, there you go.
Definitely. You guys are really funny, and the way that you talk about these hard issues on your podcast, it gives, I think, those that aren't experts a little bit more confidence to be like, God, that affects me on this level, and the level that you hear on TV. But that one doesn't really matter. You're bringing it down to like, no, this is the dish you actually can break yourself. Like the Lucille ball. Do you remember that episode where
she's breaking dishes?
I love Lucy.
Yeah, so she goes into the store and it's like this beautiful set of dishes. It's like, I'm unbreakable. And so she like looks at it, all Lucille ball and then just throws it on the ground and everybody's like, what did you just do? She's like, you said they were unbreakable. Test it.
Lucy is probably a great metaphor for this whole conversation because I'll bring it back to the Lucy episode where she's working in the candy factory.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, right.
That's what we're talking about right now.
Totally.
It's like, you try to wrap all this candy up nice and neat and it gets messy really, really
real
fast. So
and she was a progressive gal.
Yeah.
She broke some dishes in her time.
If it
wasn't for Lucille Ball, we would not have Star Trek. Just saying. Did you know that?
No, but that feels like a whole new episode.
That's a whole other episode.
Join us again.
Yeah, boy, you're going to leave everybody hanging with that one.
I know.
Look it up,
You'll have to wait till next week.
Look it up.
John, thank you.
Thank you. Bravo.
Thanks for making time with us.
Complementary Colors is a production of MCG Explore Design, an architecture and interior design firm located in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. If you'd like to hear more future episodes, be sure to subscribe to Complementary Colors wherever you find podcasts.